Start by saying, are we pretty much on time now? Yeah. Okay. So I'm Linda Pell, called Buttercup here by my committee members, and I am on the ABE committee, and I am co-hosting just to make sure that things run smoothly for Javid and Jennifer, and they will now introduce themselves. Javid and Jennifer in the same screen.
Yes, for sure. So we'd like to welcome everyone to our workshop titled Argumentative Essay Writing through the Exploration of the Work of Jean-Michel Basquiat. What we'd like to do just before we go further into a bit of an introduction of who we are, we want to invite everyone to sort of look at this painting and to answer the question that you see on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Just think about it briefly to yourself. So we'll give you a few seconds and just think about how you might respond to this. I promise we're going to come back to this later. We just want to give everyone an opportunity to join. There's still a few people joining, so we're going to maybe give folks a moment to join us and respond. Just want to direct everyone to the mini prompt that's on the screen. So if you are just joining in, just take a look at the screen and take a moment to think about the response to the prompt on the screen, please. Okay, so as I mentioned, we will come back to this, we promise. So let's get into a brief introduction. My name is Javid. I am a language and literacy enthusiast and educator. I often use community-wide discourse as well as creative research methodologies to create informative events, exhibits that sometimes include music, visual art, fine art, as well as other art forms that invite individuals to participate in relevant conversations for positive educational outcomes. As an educator, I often work within the community network, and for the last couple of years, I've been at Lehman College, Adult Learning Center, where I work as an advanced reading and writing instructor and utilize a strategy that I call classroom discourse to encourage my students to learn through the analysis of text, talk, and gesture.
Hey folks, I'm Jennifer. I'm a visual artist and I focus on educating through the lens of art. I do that in a variety of ways. Often I'll do workshops, events, things like that. My work often focuses on the relationships that we have with our with the physical, so our bodies, our physical surroundings, and I use that through, and I look at that through the lens of culture. I've spent the last 16 years in education spaces, and currently I work at Ashoka, which is a nonprofit. And there I manage online courses and competitions. I have a master's degree in social enterprise with a focus in education from American University, and then my bachelor's degree is in anthropology, more specifically with a focus in cultural anthropology from Yale. So to get us started, we're just going to do a brief nonverbal check-in that Javid and I like to use. It's called Fist of Five. It's very, very simple. So basically what is required is that we ask participants to take a second to just consider where they are emotionally in the moment. If you're having a terrible, terrible day, if you're having a wonderful day, where you are in between. And what you would do is if you're having kind of the worst day of your life, you would put up onto your camera a fist or no fingers. And if you're having the best day of your life, you would put up all 5 fingers, a full palm. And if, which is more likely, you're having some kind of day in between, you would put 1, 2, 3, or 4 fingers up. Now, the purpose of that is really to allow us to take a moment, not only to kind of gather ourselves and reflect, but also to communicate to each other in such a way where others know, without you having to explain yourself, others know kind of what kind of communication or expectations might be required for you in that moment. You know, if somebody puts up a 1, you might communicate with them in a different way than if somebody puts up a 4. Right? You might be able to expect a bit more from somebody who's putting up a 4 because they have more energy in the moment. So the question is, as fun as this activity might be, why do this particular opening check-in in this space? So during this workshop, we communicate using visual literacy, which requires the same type of skills, things like identifying main ideas, pulling out evidence, drawing conclusions, etc., that is required for reading and writing. So this activity, Fist to 5, allows us to centralize the way that we both express and understand information without spoken or written words. So we're just doing it non-verbally, right? And in this case, we use gestures specifically. Namely, we put up a certain number of fingers to communicate a state of being that we would otherwise need to share verbally. And we'll be doing much the same thing for the entirety of this workshop, meaning that we'll be taking visual cues and pulling meaning from them. So if you all wouldn't mind, just take a second to consider where you are in this moment, energetically, emotionally, physically, whatever it is. How are you feeling right now? And go ahead and either in the chat or on camera, you know, share your numbers. We always do give a moment after participants share their numbers. We provide space for anybody who would like to express why they chose the number that they did. It's never required. Nobody is ever called out in particular. It's just a space if people feel like sharing. Otherwise, it's an entirely nonverbal opportunity for us to understand where people are. So I'll stop yammering and give you all a second to organize your thoughts and share your numbers, and we'll move on from there.
Thank you.
3s and 4s. Okay, that's great. Wonderful. Is there anybody who would like to either unmute and share verbally or write in the chat why you chose the number that you did? Again, not required. We're not calling anybody out. It's just an opportunity.
Sure. Hi, I'm Andrea, and it was going to be a 5 today, but my camera's not working, so I'm kind of in a 4.
Tech problems will always bring you down.
Certainly.
Yes, but I can see y'all, so it's all good.
Good.
We're glad to have you. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for sharing, Andrea.
Hi, I'm Michelle, and I'm a little tired because I binge watched Stranger Things.
That's a great show, by the way.
I know, and I was like, you gotta go to bed because you gotta get up, but I didn't.
I think we've all been there, and it is a good show.
Okay. So thank you for those of you who shared. So in this workshop, we explore the use of visual art, and in this case, in the form of paintings and drawings by Jean-Michel Basquiat, as a way to teach argumentative essay writing. We will use these paintings as discussion prompts and as visual aids, coupled with questions to support much of the pre-writing skills needed in argumentation. I'd also like to point out something that Jennifer already mentioned, and that is that many of the same skills that are required in reading are also at play when we are utilizing our visual literacy skills. And for this reason, they translate fairly easily. Now, although I imagine that some of you may already be familiar with the life and work of Jean-Michel Basquiat, it still might be useful to do a brief biography. So Basquiat is a Brooklyn-born Afro-Puerto Rican Haitian-American visual artist that is sometimes, and sometimes not, classified as a punk, jazz, hip hop, graffiti, pop, or neo-expressionist artist. Depending on who you ask, he may fall into one more category more than the other, or he might fall into all of them. And I'm sure if you ask a few individuals, they might say none of these categories do him much justice. Basquiat is often known for his very interesting relationship with Andy Warhol. He is the highest selling American artist and is well regarded and known for mixing simplicity with complexity to create thought-provoking works of art, which includes paintings, sculptures, and music. Although today we're focusing quite exclusively on his paintings.
So one interesting thing that we want to point out about this process of using art to support writing is that it actually provides an opportunity to decrease stress through the use of storytelling. So participants quite literally look at images, pull meaning out, and then they use that to create a story collectively. Now, story here, we're using very inclusively. We know that we're talking about argumentative essay writing, yes. But all communication, as we know, builds a narrative, which is very often meant to persuade someone to believe something or to agree with something, whether it's couched in fiction and nonfiction. It could be a political or social commentary, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're all aware that crafting stories is a powerful communication tool. It allows people to take really complex ideas and experiences and put them into digestible forms, which Basquiat often does in his paintings. You'll look at a lot of them and you know that a lot is going on. Sometimes it seems very simple to interpret them. Sometimes it's much more complicated, but he really tries to show kind of a visual representation of his arguments. We also want to point out that that there's an opportunity here to increase confidence in students when you're using this approach, because they're being asked to do something that they already know how to do, and they're just simply putting it in a formal context. So they're asked to make meaning of something that they're looking at, which all of us do, including our students, on repeat every day of our lives. So in this case, the only extra thing they're being asked to do is to put that meaning that they're pulling from the visual cues onto paper. In this case, for this workshop, by answering writing prompts for the GED. So obviously there's quite a clear question that comes up then, which is how does Basquiat's work lend itself to argumentative writing in particular? And the answer is really simple. Basquiat, like many artists, creates for the purposes of persuasion. He's making a point with his art. And because of that, it's our opinion that the content he uses in his work can be used to construct or interpret an argument.
Thank you. So now that we touched on the theory a little bit, let's sort of talk about the practice informing this teacher workshop. Now, in my classroom, I utilize classroom discourse as a central part of my teaching strategy. And classroom discourse essentially refers to the language that teachers and students use to communicate with each other in the classroom environment. This often involves talking or conversation in the classroom setting, and can also create space for teachers to mediate conversations between students and an assigned text. In my classroom setting, I typically have adult learners who are typically on track to take some form of the GED exam. And some of you might be aware that the GED exam has been reinstated after we had a brief moment of having to deal with the task, and that the argumentative writing task changed a little bit. However, while argumentative writing can take many forms, there are particular objectives for the essay writing with regards to the GED exam. Let me pause for a quick second. By a show of hands, or just by unmuting yourself, how many of you are familiar with the essay writing assignment for the GED? Just briefly, you just call out or raise your hand or some type of comment of some sort. Okay, cool. We have a good amount,
Mhm.
folks. All right, so could I get a volunteer, someone to sort of call out, sort of briefly describe what students are expected to do for writing the response for the GD exam?
I could do it.
Thank you.
This is Michelle. Sorry, I'm not on video because I'm not home. So I'm sorry. Okay, so my understanding of it is that they get 2 articles now that they have to read, and they have to analyze the articles and decide which makes the stronger argument using evidence and which is a more emotional article that may have 1 or 2 pieces of evidence, but is not fact-based.
Can I add on to that?
Sure, please.
So those 2 articles that they're reading, or proses or whatever they're reading, I agree with Michelle that they have to make a judgment on which one has a stronger argument or better argument, but it's not committed to which one's the better article, but which one they can place more evidence in. They can actually choose the weaker argument, prose or piece, but actually have more, as long as they're showing that there's evidence that this is a strong article, they still get full points for it.
Oh, I
Thank you.
actually didn't know that. Thank you. I thought that there was only one right answer.
Yeah, I
Sure.
just came from a meeting with the GED
Oh,
committee or whatever, and they went with that. And I'm like, oh, okay. So something.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. So that's going to lead us into maybe the next question, so that you all can sort of tell us a little bit more about your teaching experience. So in teaching students about argumentative essay writing, which skills do you believe they might struggle with the most, given the information that was shared a moment ago? So what kind of things do we believe students might struggle with in attempting to write this argumentative essay? Feel free to unmute.
Hi. I just raised my hand. I wasn't sure. Can I speak? Is that okay?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think just in my experience, the biggest struggle they have is not putting in their own opinion about the topic. So they have to look at which author supports their argument better using references from the text. But of course, the natural inclination is to say, this is what I think, as far as their opinion about the topic. And I think that's what they struggle with most, because that's what they're used to writing. And this kind of takes them out of their comfort zone a little bit.
Agreed. Thank you. Any other things that we believe students might struggle with regard to writing the extended response or essay for the GD exam?
Well, I haven't, this is Marla Appleton. I teach at the Institute of American Language and Culture at Fordham University. And what I find, I've taught college writing 1 and 2 for international students. What I find is having the evidence, finding and matching the evidence with their thesis.
Right. Thank you. And we noticed there are a few more hands up, so feel free to unmute, and participate, jump in the conversation.
Hi, I would like to just say something also. My name is Selenise. And I think one of the struggles the students have is piecing everything together and where they belong. Usually it's all over. So getting it to flow and putting it in the right places, I think that's where they struggle as well.
Okay, thank you. If anyone else would like to, throw a comment in, feel free. Otherwise, I think I'll move forward to another question. So now that we sort of identified some areas where students might be struggling, I'm wondering what are some strategies that you might use in your classroom to support students who may be struggling to develop these key skills? What are some strategies that we might use? You see a few participants raise their hand. Feel free, Jay King. Feel free
Yes,
to jump in.
I asked them to look for statistics, facts, any appeal to our emotions, any historical references, or did the writer bring in an expert? Did the writer quote someone? Look for those things that you can then say, this is why this author supported their argument better.
Thank you, thank you. And anyone else?
Yeah, just with earlier, with people that are earlier in the process, to piggyback on what Judy said, I have them just look for numbers because numbers are usually years and percentages. And that's a way to guide them into evidence-based, facts. And also it helps them because it's usually then tied to the research facility or the researcher who is making that statement.
Thank you. These comments about the significance of evidence lend itself extremely well to this idea of finding details in the text. And we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about finding details, right, as a kind of proxy for evidence-based analysis. So sort of want to talk about sort of the practice that informs the teacher workshop. And that is, when I sort of think about the GED, I break it down into three main categories. And that is sort of what we discussed already, that students have to read two articles that make a claim or argument. They have to determine through written analysis which position presented is better supported by evidence. And then also they have to explain through written analysis. And I want to focus this idea of the analysis part. How do students understand the steps that are required to analyze details or analyze evidence, as we say. Now, with doing this, there's one particular thing that I like to highlight as a barrier for teaching essay writing, and that's especially the case that students have to be exceptional readers in order to complete this assignment. And in doing so, they have to sort of read and interpret details. They only have, about an hour, less than an hour to draft, 45 minutes, if I'm not mistaken, to write 3 to 5 paragraphs. And as many of you already know, it is essentially impossible to teach writing without teaching the complementary reading skills. Right. So that's the area that if we talk about, if we sort of highlight what we discussed, extracting evidence, finding evidence, those things happen during pre-writing, during the reading, right? So it's interesting that the major issues for developing writing skills seem to be rooted in developing students' reading abilities. And this is where, in my work, I saw an opportunity to use visual art as a way to isolate key reading and literacy skills as focal points to support argumentative essay writing. And to actually, further support this, I actually had the opportunity to participate in one of Jennifer's workshops. She does intuitive journal workshops, and while participating, I saw how much our work aligned, and I was sort of able to incorporate some of our work in my classroom to sort of build out, how to utilize art more to support teaching. Now, because of where students are in their learning journeys and because the GED is a traditionally structured exam, I typically focus on telling students to write a 4-paragraph essay. This typically is a part of a module or lesson plan series that takes several days or weeks. The essay writing activity that we'll be doing collectively today in this workshop would sort of go on for that similar time period. To highlight some key learning objectives, our writing assignment typically assesses students' ability to do the following: to cite text, in this case, sort of painting by title, to state the name of the author, creator of the work, to identify the main idea or argument, idea and argument, we're sort of connecting something there if you notice. Describe evidence that is used to support that idea argument and also to make meaning of that evidence using a concluding statement. And that's where they would insert their opinion most concretely. So to talk, sort of as a bit of a lead-in, I would say, to the activity, we would like to make a few points about Basquiat's work, which are reflected in the selection of these pieces. Number one, Basquiat was incredibly prolific, and there are several themes that were repeated in his work, namely things to do with race, mortality, self-identity, and spirituality. Basquiat has some pieces that with different degrees are text-based art, meaning that they use words in multiple ways. It could be that based on definition, or also he's utilizing based on the way they look, within a given painting. In his work, particular words may be repeated or crossed out as a way to communicate additional meaning. In this way, he's not only drawing figures and form to create images that communicate ideas, but he's also using text as an image to sometimes communicate ideas beyond finite definitions of a particular word or phrase. So I'm going to throw a quick note out there. When we use the word text, right, and I come from a language and literacy background, a bit of a linguistics background, and when I say discourse, I'm borrowing from linguistic theory quite a bit, right? So when we use the word text, we use it to refer not only to words, but also to refer to a body of work, in this case, a painting, that may or may not include words. So we want to sort of make sure you all are familiar with that. And at this point, we want to ensure that all participants in this workshop currently have something to write with and write on, because we want you to do a little bit of the activity here with us today. So we'll give you a moment to sort of gather your materials. So hopefully everyone's relatively ready. So we will now demonstrate the particular use of Basquiat's work to support argumentation using the methodology we've already described. But just a quick note before we move on. For our purposes, an argument is a claim that is made by the creator of a particular piece of work, or it is an interpretation that is made about the work. And this happens without necessarily needing to confirm what the creator's intent is or was. And this is especially the case in moments where the claim might be a bit unclear. It is very important for students to develop the skills necessary to interpret in this way, especially because they're asked to find evidence, right? It's their job and their task to find evidence. So the argument is related to the purpose or main idea of the piece, or simply the argument is what the creator is trying to make you believe, understand, or know. Now, we realize that this is a loose definition of an argument, but as you will see, this definition allows us to make connections between the relationship between main ideas and details and arguments and evidence. Final note, promise. So, while we go through these activities, a prompt series would include at least one painting, a series of simple questions that ask students, in this case, you all individuals, teachers, to think, talk, note take, and or write about any one or more aspects of the paintings. There will be no complete writing, in this particular workshop. We have 6 different prompt series, and there's different forms of classroom discourse that we're highlighting for each prompt series. The first is group thinking, group talk with a non-writing exercise. The second is independent thinking with group talk and another non-writing exercise, excuse me. The third is the same, but we do independent thinking, group talk, and non-writing. The fourth, independent thinking, note-taking. The fifth, independent thinking and drafting. And the sixth, we do independent thinking, note-taking, and a bit of a comparison draft. right? And doing it this way allows us to increment in ways to develop key skills as we move on through this series in a way that's very similar to what we would do during the class. Okay, so typically, while in class, my first prompt would ask students to analyze the title of the painting, after which we would then ask the students to identify details of the painting. However, today, we're going to work a bit backwards to showcase how we can encourage students to understand the concept of text hierarchy. And a quick definition for text hierarchy, for those of you who may not be aware, text hierarchy speaks to the idea of understanding the ways different parts of the text might be more or less significant based on its placement.
So real quick, we'll do an example description of the painting. In these moments, we ask participants really to just describe what they see without interpreting. So by way of example, in this painting, we see a Black figure with his arms up next to a Black animal in the midst of a colorful background. There's red, there's orange, there's yellow, there's green, there's brown, etc. We see that the boy has his hands raised up, which is a common gesture in Basquiat paintings, by the way, as well as images of the boy skeleton. So you see white lines inside of this Black figure, which Basquiat often does in references to anatomy in particular.
Thank you. One thing that's particularly important when analyzing Basquiat's work with students is to make sure students are aware that Basquiat often uses references to life and death, as well as gestures or expressions that can be a bit ambiguous and therefore requires great analysis. So the question that seems most obvious to ask when looking at this painting would be, are we looking at a moment of joy or a moment of pain? Or quite simply, is the boy and the dog happy or sad? Feel free to unmute yourself and tell us what you think. Are we looking at a moment of joy or a moment of pain?
I think it's a moment of pain. And it's because of the hand gesture, the dog next to him, but more so the background, chaos of colors, just the actions and going on. It seems like the world is just whirlwinding around him or her.
Thank you. Anyone else has anything similar or anything different to highlight, referencing the same details, the same gestures, the same expressions? Okay, great. So we're glad you utilized an example, right? Because this is going to allow us to sort of understand how debates can sort of take form inside the classroom. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the title on the screen, right? And I'm going to ask anyone, does everyone see the title? It says Boy and Dog in a Johnny Pump. Does anybody know what a Johnny Pump is? Somebody explain what a Johnny Pump is.
Fire hydrant?
Fire hydrant, right? This, for those of us who are from New York, we know very concretely what that is and what that means. And one of the things, and if you don't mind, was that you, Andrea?
Yes, that was me.
Thank you. I'm going to utilize you for a second, if you don't mind.
Sure.
What memories or what things can you refer to when it comes to the idea of a Johnny Pump? What experiences? When did they occur?
This is why I'm upset my camera's not working, because my facial expression is smiling of all the memories. From a girl from Brooklyn, the Johnny Pump meant it was hot outside, so hot outside you couldn't stay in your tenement or your projects or wherever you lived. So you went outside on the street, someone opened the Johnny Pump and basically sprayed water out, and everyone ran, had good times. I mean, even the young kids played, but even sometimes it was so hot, the old folks came out and rolled through the Johnny Pump because everyone was just trying to cool off.
Now, thank you, Andrea. Now, given that description, we wonder if there's many of you that now upon a second look at this image may see it a bit differently now that we've gotten that context, right? So one of the things I often like to focus on with my students is helping them to understand the significance of titles and context when trying to deconstruct main ideas and arguments. If students did not analyze the title or context, it would be a bit more difficult for them to draw conclusions. Now, there are no wrong answers, right? It's really about what you can support with evidence. However, when reading articles, students often might assume that they can skip or not consider they can skip or not consider the title and assume that the preceding paragraphs will tell them everything that they need to know. And it is our opinion that once students understand and are able to analyze the title in details, they then can produce something a lot more complex. So we're going to show you what we would like, or what we believe would be an ideal situation of a student who might take the position that Andrea spoke to.
In the painting titled Boy and Dog in a Johnny Pump by Jean-Michel Basquiat, the painter argues that hot days bring opportunities for celebration for all living things. The painting shows a boy with his hands raised and palms facing the sky. This suggests the boy is experiencing a moment of celebration and joy. The boy in the painting is also standing next to a dog that is leaning forward with a raised tail. This suggests that the dog is also happy. Both the boy and the dog are surrounded by bright and varied colors, most of which are red, orange, yellow, and one of which represents a fire hydrant, suggesting activity and heat from the sun. Basquiat also uses green in the picture to symbolize the growth of plants and trees during the summertime. In my opinion, this painting is meant as a celebration of a common but particular childhood experience.
Right. So, and again, I want to repeat this idea, although we are leaning with a positive frame of this particular image, it's important to note that participants do not need to be able to identify Basquiat's intent, right? They would rather need to sort of figure out what the argument, they would rather need to figure out what arguments can be made by looking at what evidence they can use to support their assumed or their interpreted argument. And also note in this potential student response, key words and phrases like argues or shows or suggests, and also the phrase "in my opinion," which encourages students to concretely include themselves in their analysis.
So again, remember, there are no incorrect interpretations as long as you can pull evidence to support that interpretation. So this second piece that we're using, it's called Jailbirds. We're giving you the title up front. He painted it in 1983. So let's all take a look at this image. Think about the title, Jailbirds. And in a moment, we're going to ask you to answer some questions about what you see. Please don't bother writing anything down. Just as we have been doing, you're just going to call out ideas that come to mind. So you can either just, unmute yourself when you're ready to speak or use the Zoom hand raise function. And we'll just kind of collectively negotiate our speaking time as we go.
Okay. Okay, so first, we would like everyone to describe what they see, or for someone to sort of unmute and just let us know, describe in literal terms what you see. We want a little description, not an interpretation in this case.
This is Marlis. I see two larger individuals with batons menacing a smaller person.
Thank you, thank you. Any other descriptions, please?
I see three individuals, like it was described. Two of them are larger, one seems to be smaller. The smaller one also seems to be dead because there's X's on their eyes.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Anything else?
I see the stars.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So based on that evidence, the details, right, the things you describe, we want to ask you all to sort of talk about what you think these things represent. Feel free to just jump in anywhere here.
Well, the title says jailbirds, so they are, what it would seem to imply is that they are all in the same situation.
Thank you.
And one of them it looks like he has some kind of a weapon in his hand, but the other doesn't. Maybe the other one is trying to protect the young boy. He's trying to pull him away from the guy who is something menacing.
Interesting, interesting. Any other interpretations of any other detail, individual or collective analysis of the details?
The biggest figure looks like he has a hat. So perhaps this is somebody who's supposed to protect, but is inflicting pain instead. Like I see the hat as like part of a uniform.
Okay, anyone else?
Well, I see with the stars, you know, that sort of classic cartoon image when you get hit on the head and the cartoon figure sees stars, and then of course 2 seconds later they're fine. But those stars also look like they belong in the sky as well. And I'm not sure how I interpret that. I see two things at once. I see the cartoon stars and then I see the sky stars.
Thank you.
I also see, I'm sorry, excuse me.
No, please continue.
I also see in the sky, or those stars, are these arrows pointing. One is to one, I would assume, baton, the one character's carrying, and the other one's pointing towards the other other large being with the other baton.
Okay, so what community-based relationship do we think this piece is speaking to?
Well, I would say the relationship of law enforcement to community.
Right,
That's
and
what it
with
makes
that,
me think of.
right, all right, thank you. And with that, we want to sort of lead into maybe a small thing. So what do you think is being communicated about police relations with the general public?
Not anything positive. I mean, I see both of the larger figures who both have batons as dangerous and harming the smaller figure.
Right. You know, and if we were to prompt you a bit further, we might be able to turn that into a bit of an argument itself. You might argue that this painting, or you might say that this painting argues that police have a volatile relationship with the general public, right? That would be the argument, right? You'd have to sort of identify what evidence. Now, someone else might speak to notions of protection. Someone might say that, oh, maybe there's a weapon. You know, there's a lot of different directions we can go when interpreting this piece. We're going to move on to.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
I'm a little bit puzzled by the title. So if you say that this picture, this painting, is about the relationships between the police and the general public, so how come the title is Jailbirds in plural?
That's a good question. Okay. Anyone want to attempt to answer that from their own interpretation?
Well, I kind of see a power structure, you know, and if it is, there's certainly a power structure in the prisons, you know, as well as with the police in the community or people deemed to be authorities. So that's how I see it. I don't know.
For sure. It's a good question. You know, when Jennifer and I were putting this together, we played around with different positions and we selected ones based on, you know, a series of negotiations. One thing that if I were to throw something out there, is notice it doesn't say jailbird. It So jailbirds. So to make that plural, I think somebody mentioned that, means that there's at least more than one jailbird. And we see that there's clearly a dynamic between two individuals who seemingly have a similar stature and another individual that has, a different stature. So then the question would be, who would be the jailbirds in this particular image? If we're talking about, I'm sorry?
Yeah, I'm sorry. No, could it be all of them? Could it be just happening in the jail? And this is like an internal, like two bigger individuals, they're just ganging up on a smaller and weaker one. And
Absolutely.
everyone basically has a weapon, like different types of weapon, but they all have a weapon. So that's the way I see it.
I like that, Larissa. I'm looking at they could all be, or the two, what's the phrase? Birds of a feather flock together. Those two larger figures are birds of the jail system. They flock, and as working in correctional services, they flock together, they work together. Sometimes in a good way, sometimes not such in a great way.
Right.
Yes, I think that's another interesting interpretation, because it could be that they are the bully power structure within the system itself, within the jail, and they're exercising power over a weaker jailbird.
Thank you. So one thing we want to, if we have a lot of different claims, a lot of different arguments, and we're all utilizing the same evidence to make different claims, different arguments, right? And it's quite easy for us to sort of have this discussion, agree and or disagree, utilizing the same evidence, and to sort of interpret what we believe is the purpose and the argument made by the painter. I'm going to move on.
So this painting is actually my favorite of Basquiat's. It's called Riding with Death. He painted it in 1988, it means it's his last painting before he died, actually. So let's all take a look at this image, think about the title. Again, just kind of call out your answers verbally, but please describe what you see.
Describe what you see. Literal descriptions, please.
I see a figure unraveling, a person unraveling and straddling between life and death.
Okay. Any other literal descriptions?
Oh, sorry, that's not literal.
No worries.
There seems to be a skeleton of maybe an animal or just a larger figure. So you see like a skull and some bones that represent maybe arms and feet.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was trying to determine if the skeleton was an animal or a human. Initially, I thought it was a human, but given the structure of the front legs, I think it's an animal. And then it looks like the slightly opaque figure of a person on top of the animal skeleton.
Okay, thank you. So with those descriptions, so what do we think these things represent? I mean, we got one interpretation. So do you want to share that? Share one more time with us?
Sure. Yeah, I just see a figure unraveling, and the skeleton represents where it's going, which may be death. That's what it looks like to me. But straddling both worlds, the here and the afterlife.
Any other interpretations?
I feel like it's very similar to the ancient sort of cave art. Is what I see. So maybe that's not, I don't know what that is, but that's the first thing that came to mind. That, and today's the Kentucky Derby. So those are two very disparate ideas. But it really did remind me of that cave art that you see, just very basic, kind of one-dimensional, but then it looks like the background has some other elements to it.
Thank you. One thing to sort of frame this a little bit more, Basquiat is often framed as a primitive artist. And we mentioned this idea of sort of bouncing between the simplicity and the complexity, which oftentimes made the conversation about Basquiat a bit interesting. We're going to move on to the next example here.
So this one is called In Italian. It was painted in 1983. For this one, you'll actually need the writing tools that we asked you to get earlier, because you're going to be required to do a little bit more work. We'll be asking the same set of questions that we have been asking, but this time we ask that you write just a short little draft paragraph, including your answers in the same way that we've shown in the sample student response that we saw earlier. So you are basically taking the role of the student.
We'll give you all a few moments to draft. This is just a drafting activity. Draft a quick response. About what, 4 to 5 sentences, as we say sometimes as teachers. Yeah. All right, so, we want to get an understanding of how this felt a little bit. We noticed, in organizing this that, as we go to each painting, they increase in their difficulty, we might say. And it's principally because when we include text as art, right, our brains function a bit differently, right? So I'm looking for someone to sort of volunteer and talk to how they felt while looking at this particular painting, and also to do us a favor and perhaps read us what they came up with in their little draft.
I will, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so I see a wall of ads. I see coins, animals, language, and the language is in English and it looks like Latin. And then something you pointed out earlier about crossing out words. So I don't know what the significance of that is, but I think they represent the money, the word liberty. Does money equal freedom? Do you have more freedom if you have more money? The animals, I don't know what they represent. This one was quite detailed. You had to really, your mind went all different places with this. So my draft is more of a ramble rather than a draft.
No worries, no worries. Classroom discourse. So anyone else like to tell us, what they notice in this painting?
Yes, I would like to share. Initially, I see it as a poster of Italian ephemera mementos. And then on closer inspection, I see the reference to blood, sangria, and then again at the heart pumping blood. The coins, I think with the profiles, are reminiscent of the ancient coins that you see. And then he says 10 cents up there, crown of thorns, and then the word corpus. So it is this integration of Catholic symbols, I think. The crown of thorns, the corpus, Corpus Christi, the body of Christ. And the teeth, I'm trying to figure out how the teeth set in. Maybe they are a symbol of permanence when the body has been completely, I don't want to say destroyed, but is no longer evident. There are teeth and bones left. Yeah, it's very complex and has a lot going on, but I definitely get the the influence of the church in the Italian culture.
I saw the thing that kind of struck out for me was earlier in this classroom discussion, we talked about what we asked students to look for, facts, information, numbers. And I saw the number 1594, 17 article, the name of the piece was called in Italian. And I'm like, what was going on in Italy? Whether there was an invasion or there was war or something, because this doesn't look like a peaceful transition or transaction here. It looks like something that was just warlike, something like an invasion or some people coming in, and in God we trust, and different influences coming into Italy.
Yeah, the
Thank you.
phrase that keeps
No, please
coming
go.
up.
Continue.
Sorry, the phrase that keeps coming up for me is blood money, and Jesus as an economic pursuit. Killing him and the money that people got for that. I don't know, but that's what I got from the blood references and the
Pieces of silver, right?
yeah.
Right. So as we mentioned, Basquiat often uses images of anatomy, symbols, of capitalism, and words as all together as a singular image to communicate very particular ideas. And the more combined these images and ideas are, the more you might be required to help your students understand the significance of analyzing words as images. Again, Basquiat uses quite a few words in different pieces, and the meaning of the word is certainly important, but so is how it looks. So many of you sort of spoke to the idea of things being crossed out. We noticed that there's multilingualism here, a little bit. So all these things are opportunities to highlight on one details or a set of details to encourage a little bit of an analysis with regards to utilizing the details.
All right, so we're going to add yet another layer of complexity. As you see, there are actually two paintings on the screen now, one of which you've already seen, so that's a break. Boy and Dog and the Johnny Pump is the first painting that we discussed. The second one on the right is called Boxer. They were both painted in the same year in 1982. And we're going to do a bit of a comparison between them. Okay, so we've gone through a few individual paintings, 4 to be exact, and we've highlighted the importance of describing the painting as well as interpreting the themes and purpose. And now we're going to do that for each of these, and then do a comparison for what we think, based on the evidence that we're seeing in each of these paintings, better supports his argument for each of these paintings.
Okay, so take a moment to take a look at both of these images, probably more specifically the one on the right, and to consider the questions that are on the screen.
No need to write anything down this go around. We'll be doing a little bit of writing for the next one, but just like with the individual paintings, the first of the comparisons, we're actually going to give you a sample student response. So now is just a thinking exercise and some verbal sharing.
Right, so whatever you see, or how would you compare these two things? So whenever you're ready, feel free to unmute and let us know what you think.
Well, I think the most obvious thing is the hand gestures are the same, obviously. I honestly, in the second one, I see Rock'em Sock'em Robots is what I see. But which one better supports? Wow.
I just wanted to say very quickly that the Boxer painting is much, of course, for me at least, much easier to understand. It's more straightforward, because the previous one, I was staring at it for I don't know how long, and I just could identify certain details, certain items, but I could not, I could understand my students when they have like so many ideas, but they cannot put them together. And someone mentioned it doesn't flow, everything is separate. So that was exactly the feeling for me with the previous painting. I saw the words, I saw the allusions to the church, I saw the crown of thorns, and then for whatever reason, the word thorns was crossed out, whatever, I don't want to go back. But this one is definitely, as I said, very clear and very straightforward. I'm talking about the boxer. Because you can see a powerful figure, broad-shouldered, probably the face is not too angelic looking, fierce, aggressive, whatever. This is what I see, but I would not be able to answer the question, what evidence well, for this one I could, but to compare these two paintings, I don't know. That's my honest answer.
Well,
That sounded quite a comparison.
Right.
well, the boxer,
The
the boxer is celebrating a victory, I think.
right.
Mhm.
And we already know from what you've told us that the boy and the dog and the Johnny Pump are celebrating joy,
Yes.
the joy of of the simple thing of being on the street in the summer and
The
and
victory.
experiencing the cool water. So, I mean, I think they're both about celebration and about joy. And
Yeah.
I don't know, for me, the boxer is more obviously a celebration of joy and victory because
And
less
I
complex.
wanted to jump in. Can I?
and the boxer is also could be celebrating Black Power with his
Mhm.
arms raised in victory and the strength of the individual, and that a certain amount of power has to come from aggression.
Okay. I agree with both what Buttercup and Bethia, sorry, that's
Tina.
stated. Bethia, sorry, my vision is a little off. I see Black boy joy or Black man joy in both of them, but my argument would be which one celebrates it more. Is it the boxer who's just won a championship, he's got his belt on, or is it the boy who's gotten relief from the torturous sun and heat, stifling heat of his community by getting through the Johnny Pump? And that's what our students are constantly, exactly what our students are going to be complex with when they take the GED. They're looking at two images or two proses, well, actually two pieces of writing, and they're trying to pick and tease out which one they can support more and say, this one is definitely supports more joy because, or more excitement or celebration because of these elements.
Thank you. Thank you. Clearly, we heard a lot of arguments, right? And a lot of different ways we can utilize evidence to support those arguments. And I wanted to pay attention like how, it takes a lot of work for us to sort of do this in discussion, but it's also a lot more fluid, a lot easier when we do it in conversation. We're not, struggling to figure out what words to use on the page, and it comes up more naturally when we utilize it through discourse. And it's our opinion that classroom discourse allows folks to do it more concretely, and also that students would find it much more easily to utilize art to analyze debates, analyze details in text, or in this case, paintings.
So because this is a comparison, we've given you a potential response that is 3 paragraphs, no introduction, just 3 paragraphs, and we've separated them according to the painting. So the first painting does the exact same thing that we've done in our other responses, describes what we see in Boy and Dog and the Johnny Pump and what that represents. You've already seen this paragraph. Then we move on to describing what we see in the painting titled Boxer and what that suggests. we say in here, I will start reading from here so that you can see.
Paragraph 2.
And then the third paragraph is the comparison. And again, we're trying to argue, which of these two paintings can we pull enough evidence from to say, they make their point better in this painting than in the other painting. So I'll skip the first paragraph. You've already seen it and heard it. Starting from the second. In the painting titled Boxer by Jean-Michel Basquiat, which he also painted in 1982, the painter argues that achievements should be celebrated. The painting shows a brown or black-skinned man with arms raised up. He has boxing gloves on his hands. This gesture would suggest celebration. Again, notice those key words, right? Suggest. There are squiggly lines and some color in the background, which may suggest an audience. There are white lines on the figure, which might suggest an attention to anatomy and therefore the body. In my opinion, this painting is meant as a celebration of the public win of a boxing match. Third paragraph. In my opinion, while both paintings argue that celebrating is important, which is something that you all brought up, the second painting, Boxer, better conveys its message. In the first painting, Boy and Dog and the Johnny Pump, it is necessary to know the title of the piece in order to know that there is a fire hydrant in the painting. And pay attention to that, right? Because in the beginning, when we didn't show the title, the interpretation that was offered was one that was negative, right? Which is what I first thought when I saw it. And you had to know the title in order to interpret it differently. In the first painting, Boy and Dog and the Johnny Pump, it is necessary to know the title of the piece in order to know that there is a fire hydrant in the painting. The image of the fire hydrant is only represented by an area of red paint. In order to understand the painting, you have to know that Johnny Pump is slang for fire hydrant. Therefore, it is easier for a viewer to misunderstand the painting. The painting titled Boxer, however, is easy to understand. It is easy to identify the man, the boxing gloves, and his gesture of celebration. So this is really what you all already said. All we did was anticipate the thoughts and put them down in writing in a very simple way that would allow you to see how we take the evidence of one piece, determine the argument for that piece, take the evidence from another piece, determine the argument for that piece, and say, hey, there is a good amount of evidence in this piece that really supports its argument, and this one is a little bit more difficult to understand.
Right. So with that, we're going to move on just to briefly show you two other images. We won't stay on them for time purposes, but we would like to at least show them to you so that we can show you the level of complexity that can be sort of brought to, with this assignment. So this piece is called 50 Cent Piece. Notice all the text. In order for students to actually sit with this, it would be pretty stressful. And controlled induced stress can be helpful at times, but this one is very much so text heavy and is very much so unlike what we would expect students to experience when they're utilizing more article-based forms. This other one, you want to describe this briefly?
So this other one, you see, some red in the corner. It says flames. You see a number of text images here. You saw a lot more text in the last one. This one lends itself maybe a little bit more to a combined interpretation between the text and the images. Now, one thing to kind of reinforce that we've referenced throughout the workshop is that with all art, it's not always clear what a creator intends. And so sometimes students will pull out very particular interpretations completely unlike one another and potentially very unlike what the creator was thinking, right? Now, in some cases, if the creator is still living, they might be able to say directly, this is actually what I was thinking about, and this is what I meant. In cases where the creator is no longer with us and didn't leave any kind of description behind, we might not be able to get that clarity from them. But that is not the point. The point is, what are we as viewers able to pull out from what we're seeing and interpret it in a way that makes sense based on the evidence that we're seeing?
Okay. Okay, so we had a little drawing activity, but we only have 2 minutes. So we want to leave room for some questions. If anyone would like to contact us, there's a QR code that you can scan with your phones. But just as a, just to wrap this up not quite nicely, we put this on the screen, at the beginning of the presentation. And we kind of set you all up, and we acted like there was a correct answer. In truth, there is no correct answer. There is no one answer. The figure in the painting to the left doesn't depict the camel or the goat or the man any more than anything else. And we know that, well, for two reasons, because we have the artist here and she can tell us, right? But to speak in true form and in true fashion of what the intent of this workshop is that it is the responsibility of the viewer to make meaning of the work of art. So what you see is essentially what it is. You just have to utilize your evidence to affirm that. We want to thank you, and if anyone has any questions, feel free to share with us.
And I want to add that the evaluation link is there in the chat. Alex Pence, the conference chair, put it there. So it's far up in the chat, or I guess after the hands. Yes, right. And yeah, after the hands and the numbers. So please fill that out for us. And then there'll be lunch. I want everyone to know, half an hour for lunch. And from 1 to 2 is the publisher's hour. And from 2 to 3:30 is the plenary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to say kudos to both of you.
Yes.
I'm trying always as an educator to try creative ways and trying to use culturally responsive curriculum. And this is an excellent example of that, because it's created by a person that I always teach, they cannot be what they cannot see. If they don't see themselves in the art or as a person creating the art, they'll never know that they could be artists. And this was an excellent piece in it, introduction into perspective writing and an argumentative essay. Thank you so much.
Yes, it was excellent use of art to one form of art, the visual art, to support the writing, another art form. Terrific.
Yes, very, very, very well done. But I just tried the link and it says that it's something about dynamic. I hope it's just not my computer.
No, this has happened again.
So I think the thing to do, because I am able to access it, is to maybe put, copy and paste it into the browser.
Yes, that's what happened in the previous class.
I'm sorry, I know that we're about to finish and this will just take a minute. Can I ask the creator a question? Jennifer?
Sure.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Yeah, could you please explain? I love the colors in this painting and I loved your presentation. It was very interesting. I mean, for both of you, but this is a specific question for Jennifer. Because I was staring at this and trying to answer this multiple choice questions. I definitely did not see the old man, but I was, so I just want to listen to you, if you don't mind, please.
Sure. So this painting is actually called Soldier at the Summit. It's actually an oversight that I didn't put the title on there, so apologies for that. This painting is called Soldier at the Summit. The colors in the background, you'll see swirls and things, are meant to represent kind of a forested area or a hill. This particular painting, I see a goat man. Again, other people see different things, but I very much see kind of like this erect posture as kind of a soldierly approach. You might imagine a lone soldier who has survived some kind of attack at the top of the hill, kind of looking forward into what they have to experience. So that's kind of where I was coming from. You'll notice there's kind of braided a braided 3D piece on the right side, which is very much kind of a callback to, you know, on some military uniforms, they'll have kind of like the braided cord to denote rank in the military. So again, another military reference. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with this piece. But the interesting thing about, so because I'm an intuitive artist, I have a lot of drawings and paintings that really just start as shapes and lines and things that kind of are responsive to one another. And the thing that brings me most joy in doing it and in communicating with other people is that the process is actually one in which the viewer and the creator, me, have to kind of negotiate what the meaning is. So there's an additional level of discourse. You know, with a lot of art forms, a lot of visual art forms, excuse me, an artist will put out something with a very particular intent, and the viewer kind of looks at it by themselves and says, oh, what does the creator mean to say here? But with my art, what I really love is when people say to me, you know, Jennifer, I know you see a goat man because you said you saw a goat man, but I don't see that. I actually see a butterfly or whatever it is, right? And then you can kind of outline, you know, oh, well, this is kind of where the wings are, this is where the body is. And then we can have a discussion about why it is that we see those different things. You know, I really think that, so there is a, I'm sorry, we're over, but there's a surrealist tradition, a surrealist practice within the art form called automatism, where artists will just kind of freestyle a piece of art. Sometimes people will do it with writing. I think that's confusing. But for drawing or painting, they have no intent when they set out to create something. They're just really just creating lines.
Excuse me, is this from the same period as the last one he painted before he died? Because they're both monochromatic.
It's hers artwork. It's
that's
Jennifer
yours. Oh,
yeah, it's mine.
I was drawing the connection between, you know, that last one that you mentioned was your favorite. The background was so different from all of his others.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't realize there was a misunderstanding. No.
Well, I'm probably the only one who misunderstood.
No worries. Then I'll stop.
Thank you very much for answering. This is interesting. So basically, it's like an exercise in interaction between a viewer and a creator, right? And it's very much open to the interpretation. Okay, I just can say that, as I said, I love it. I love the colors. I do not see the soldier at all, even after you explained it to me. I see something completely different. And my favorite Basquiat's painting was, you know, the same as yours, the writing the death, I think, right? That was very, I think, very elegant and very minimalistic, but that's just my personal preferences. All right, it would be nice, you know, to have maybe a workshop where you explain some of the more difficult paintings, because as I said before, I really struggle with them. You know, the last two that you showed, especially the one before the last, it was really, it's like looking, and it makes you kind of anxious also. Maybe that was the, you know, the author's, the painter's intent, I don't know, but it makes you, like me, I mean, I'm only describing my own perception. It makes me really nervous and anxious because it's a little bit overwhelming. That's all I can say. But thank you very much again. It was very interesting.
May I ask, when you present this to students, do you put down the camel, goat, old man, all of the above for them to interpret it, for them to try to find the pieces?
Yes. Well, so when I've used a few of Jennifer's pieces in my classes, and in some cases I may have something like this, but those classes would be more aligned with having discussions about how to answer the multiple choice section of the GED, because I utilize the art as well in that section as well. Or other times I may show a piece of work and ask students for them to identify objects or forms, you know, within a particular piece.
Right.
And I think this particular painting is very good for that purpose, because the old man, it could be in the tail. That swirl looks like an eye, and and then it looks like he has a beard. And of course you have the goat at the front, and then you have an animal at the bottom, which could be a camel. So it's in a painting like this, one can identify all three aspects.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And that, I think that was the goal of this. Everyone has a different perspective. It's like those famous things you see online when you like, do you see the old lady or you see a young lady? And when it's like, it depends on how you feel. It's more of your perspective and how you are going to take that perspective in your argumentative writing and flesh it out into a piece that supports the argument. What do you see, or what is captured here? So
Absolutely.
I love your work
Thank you
again. I
very
have to
much.
bounce because I got to grab something to eat, but I'm
Thank you
sending
very
you
much,
messages. I
everyone.
can't wait to see the slide decks.
Thank you
Awesome.
very much, everyone. This is being recorded, so it'll be on our website. And thank you, of course, Javid and Jennifer, for wonderfully interesting and stimulating discussion here. Yeah, that's what people are writing about it. Yes, Michelle?
No, thank you.
Yes, and
Thank you.
now lunch, and then publishers, and then the plenary. Okay,
Great.
thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thank you
Dr.
very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Peace, love, and light.